Nevada, Las Vegas, November 2002. In the world of high-stakes gambling, there is an unspoken rule: the house always wins. The glittering lights of the Las Vegas Strip aren't funded by winners. They are funded by the millions of people who walk through those glass doors thinking they have a system. But in the late 90s, a man named Dominic LoRiggio didn't just have a system. He had a physical breakthrough that would eventually cost the casino industry millions and force them to change the way craps is played forever. To understand how Dominic did it, you first have to understand the environment he was walking into. Casinos are built to be sensory overloads. The loud music, the lack of windows, the free drinks. It's all designed to keep you in a state of mild disorientation. The games themselves are mathematical traps. In roulette, the green zero ensures the house wins. In blackjack, the dealer's hidden card gives the house the edge. But craps? Craps was always considered the most random game of all. It's a game of kinetic energy. You take 2 cubes of cellulose acetate, shake them in your hand, and hurl them across a long table. They hit a wall covered in rubber pyramids designed to make the bounce as chaotic as possible. It is the definition of randomness. Or at least that's what the casinos believed until Dominic LoRiggio showed up. Dominic wasn't a career criminal or a street hustler. He was a disciplined, intellectual man with a background in software. He looked at the world through the lens of logic, data, and repeatable processes. Before he ever touched a pair of dice, he was a professional blackjack player. He was part of the generation that learned card counting as a science. He understood that if you track the ratio of high cards to low cards in a deck, you can identify the exact moment when the mathematical probability shifts in your favor. But card counting had a fatal flaw. It was a mental game that the casinos had learned to spot. The eye in the sky, those thousands of cameras hidden in the ceiling, could track a player's betting patterns. If a player bet small when the count was low and suddenly dropped $5,000 when the count was high, the pit bosses would descend. Dominic realized that in blackjack, you are always at the mercy of the deck. You are a passenger. He wanted to be the driver. This search for control led him to the craps table. He started wondering if the physical act of throwing the dice could be mastered in the same way a professional golfer masters a swing or a basketball player masters a free throw. Most people at the craps table are random rollers. They grab the dice, shake them like a cocktail, and throw them with no regard for orientation. Dominic realized that if he could influence the dice even by a small percentage, the house edge would vanish. The journey began in a basement. Dominic teamed up with Chris Palicki, an engineer who shared his obsession. Together, they bought a professional-grade craps table and installed it in a private home. They didn't just play, they experimented. They realized that the secret wasn't magic, it was physics. They identified 3 core pillars of what would become known as controlled shooting. The first pillar was the set. When a shooter is handed the dice, they usually just pick them up. Dominic and Chris developed specific configurations. The most famous was the 3V set. By placing the dice together so the 3 dots formed a V shape, they ensured that the faces showing on the top, bottom, front, and back were all numbers that did not add up to 7. In craps, the number 7 is the outsider. If you are the shooter and you roll a 7 after the initial point is set, you lose. By setting the dice this way, Dominic was physically hiding the 6s and 1s, making it mathematically harder for the dice to land on a 7. The second pillar was the grip. Most people hold dice with their whole hand, which adds torque and spin. Dominic used a 3-finger front grip, holding the dice as if they were a single solid block. The goal was to keep the dice perfectly aligned in the air. If one die started spinning faster than the other, the randomness returned. They had to fly like a pair of synchronized swimmers. The third and most difficult pillar was the delivery. This is where Dominic became a legend. He developed a throw that was so soft, so precise, that it was nicknamed the Golden Touch. Instead of hurling the dice, he would release them at a specific 45-degree angle. He wanted them to have just enough energy to reach the back wall, but not enough to bounce off the rubber pyramids with force. He wanted them to kiss the wall and die on the felt. Dominic practiced this for hours every single day. He recorded his rolls on spreadsheets, tracking thousands of throws. He wasn't looking for a lucky streak. He was looking for a small signature. In gambling math, if you can reduce the frequency of sevens from the random average of 1 in 6 rolls to 1 in 7 or 8 rolls, the player gains a massive 4% to 5% advantage over the house. That might sound small, but in the world of Vegas, a 5% edge is a license to print money. When Dominic finally felt ready to take his skills to the Las Vegas Strip, he didn't go alone. He knew that a lone shooter winning too much would be spotted instantly. He formed a team called Rosebud. The team had a strict set of rules. They would enter a casino separately. One person would be the spotter, another would be the anchor, and Dominic would be the shooter. They used a technique called wongjing, named after the gambling theorist Stanford Wong, where they would wait for a table to get hot before placing their big bets. The first few months were a whirlwind of success. They moved from the MGM Grand to the Bellagio, then to Caesar's Palace. Dominic would step up to the table, take a deep breath, and set his dice. To the casual observer, he just looked like a focused gambler, but the results were undeniable. While the average craps turn lasts about 8.5 rolls, Dominic was routinely hitting 30, 40, and 50 rolls without a 7. As the Rosebud team's bankroll grew into the hundreds of thousands, the tension started to rise. Dominic wanted to bet bigger. He knew his edge was real and he wanted to capitalize on it. But some members of the team were afraid of the heat. In the casino world, heat is the level of scrutiny you receive from the floor staff. If you win too much, the pit bosses start standing closer. They start talking into their sleeves. They start checking the dice for imperfections every time they come back to the center. The breaking point for the team came when Dominic realized he could no longer stay in the shadows. He wanted to prove to the world that his method worked. He broke away from the conservative Rosebud team and partnered with Frank Scobletto, a charismatic gambling writer. Together, they launched Golden Touch Craps, a school where they taught their methods to others. This was a bold move. By teaching the method, they were essentially declaring war on the casinos. Now, the casinos had a problem. Dominic wasn't cheating. Cheating, by legal definition, involves changing the state of the game through illegal means, using weighted dice, using a sliding device, or past posting. Adding chips after the result is known. Dominic was simply using his body and the laws of physics. There was no law in the Nevada revised statutes that said you couldn't throw dice softly. Because they couldn't arrest him, the casinos turned to game protection. They started implementing new house rules specifically designed to stop Dominic. One rule was the no setting rule. Pit bosses would bark at shooters to just throw the damn dice if they took more than a second to align them. Another was the back wall rule, where the dice had to hit the back wall with enough force to be considered a valid roll. If the roll was too soft, the dealer would call no roll, and the bets wouldn't count. The most intense moment of Dominic's career happened at a high-end casino where he had been rolling for over an hour. The table was packed. Total strangers were winning tens of thousands of dollars just by betting on Dominic's hand. The casino was losing a fortune. The pit boss, a veteran who had seen every trick in the book, realized he couldn't stop the physics, so he tried to stop the man. He walked up to Dominic, stood inches from his face, and began a barrage of verbal harassment. He questioned his manhood, he threatened to have him thrown out, and finally he leaned in and whispered, "You're a dead man in this town." Dominic didn't blink. He knew that the moment he lost his composure, he would lose his signature throw. Controlled shooting requires a heart rate of about 60 beats per minute. It requires the steady hand of a surgeon. In a moment of pure cinematic defiance, Dominic looked at the pit boss and said, "I'm going to hit a hard 10. A hard 10 is a bet that both dice will land on 5. The odds are 8 to 1. It is a sucker bet for anyone but a controlled shooter. Dominic set his dice into the 5-5 configuration, used his front-fingered grip, and let the dice fly. They traveled in a perfect, tight spiral, hit the felt, grazed the back wall, and stopped. 2 5s. The table erupted. People were screaming, chips were flying, and the pit boss turned white. Dominic gathered his winnings, which amounted to a small fortune in that single roll, and walked out into the desert night. The legacy of Dominic LoRiggio is still felt in every casino in the world today. If you go to a craps table tonight and try to set your dice, you will likely hear a dealer tell you to keep them moving. If you throw them too softly, you will be warned. The casinos eventually realized that while they couldn't prove he was cheating in a court of law, they could trespass him. In Nevada, a casino is private property. They don't need a reason to kick you out. They can simply say, your business is no longer desired. Dominic was eventually banned from almost every major property on the Strip. But he didn't care. He had already won. He had proven that the unbeatable house edge was a lie. He showed that with enough discipline and a deep understanding of the physical world, a single individual could take on a billion-dollar industry and win. He didn't use a computer. He didn't use a glitch. He used his hands. He treated the casino floor like a laboratory and the dice like a scientific experiment. Today, Dominic is remembered not as a gambler, but as the man who decoded the most random game in the world. He remains the only man in history to bankrupt Vegas tables without ever breaking a single law. His story serves as a reminder. The house only wins as long as you play by their rules. But if you're smart enough to learn the laws of physics, you can make your own rules.